My name is Rebecca Mitchell, and I'm 47 years old. I've been divorced for almost 8 years now from my ex-husband, Thomas. We have 2 children together, our son Jason, who's 24 and working as an engineer in another state, and our daughter Eliza, who just turned 21 last month. I've dedicated my entire adult life to my children, making sure they had everything they needed, even when times were tough. When Thomas and I split up, I fought to create stability for them despite the upheaval. I wanted them to know that no matter what happened between their father and me, they would always be loved and provided for. After the divorce, I moved us to a modest suburban home outside of Portland. It wasn't fancy, but it had good schools and safe neighborhoods. Exactly what I wanted for my kids. I took on extra work as an administrative assistant at a local insurance company to supplement the child support payments, which weren't always consistent. There were nights I stayed up mending clothes instead of buying new ones. Months where I skipped buying myself anything so Jason could go on his school science trip or Eliza could get those dance lessons she desperately wanted. Thomas wasn't a bad father, just an inconsistent one. He moved across the country for a job opportunity 3 years after our divorce, which meant his visits became sporadic. He made good money as a financial consultant, but his involvement in our children's lives gradually diminished to holiday phone calls and occasional birthday gifts. Despite this, he had always insisted on contributing to their college funds, especially for Eliza, who was his princess. He set up a special savings account that would help her establish herself after college, a nest egg for whatever she might need when starting her adult life. She deserves the world, Becca, he told me during one of our rare civil conversations after the divorce. I may not be there for the day-to-day, but I want to make sure she's taken care of when it really matters. That account had grown to nearly $45,000 by the time Eliza turned 21. Money that was meant to give her a head start in life, whether for graduate school, a down payment on a home, or starting a business. Thomas had been clear that she couldn't access it until she finished her bachelor's degree, as an incentive to complete her education. The account was in my name for the time being, with plans to transfer it to her upon graduation. As for me, I never remarried. There were a couple of relationships that showed promise, but nothing ever clicked the way I hoped it would. Maybe I was too cautious after what happened with Thomas, or maybe I was just too busy making sure my kids had everything they needed. Either way, I made peace with being on my own. My world revolved around my children and my job, and that was enough for me. Or so I thought until 3 weeks ago, when everything I believed about my family, especially my relationship with my daughter, was turned upside down. It started on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday. I'd just come home from work, exhausted after a long day of dealing with demanding clients and a particularly fussy boss. I was looking forward to a quiet evening at home with Eliza, who was on break from college. She had been staying with me for the past 2 weeks, and though we'd had a few minor disagreements, typical mother-daughter friction about her staying out late or leaving messes around the house, things had been relatively peaceful. When I walked through the door, I noticed several of her suitcases by the entrance. My first thought was that she was packing to return to campus early, though her break wasn't supposed to end for another week. "Eliza," I called out, setting down my purse and keys. "Are you heading back to school already?" She emerged from her bedroom with another bag slung over her shoulder, looking slightly startled to see me. "Oh, Mom, you're home early." "Only by about 15 minutes, I said, glancing at my watch. "What's with all the luggage? Your break isn't over until next week." Eliza tucked a strand of her dark hair behind her ear, a nervous gesture I recognized from her childhood. "I'm going to stay at Ryan's place for a few days. His parents are out of town, and we wanted some time together before heading back to campus." Ryan was her boyfriend of 6 months. I'd met him twice, a polite young man studying business, though there was something about him that never quite sat right with me. He seemed too polished, too calculated for his age. But Eliza was smitten, and I tried to be supportive. "A few days." I frowned. "Why so much luggage for a short stay?" She shrugged casually. "You know me, Mom. I like to have options." Her voice had that slightly defensive edge that had become more common in our conversations lately. Something felt off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. "Have you had dinner yet? I could make us something before you go." "Already ate," she replied quickly. "And Ryan's waiting for me. He's parked down the street." "He couldn't come to the door to say hello?" I asked, not hiding my disapproval. Eliza rolled her eyes. Mom, please don't start. We're just in a hurry. I helped her carry the bags outside, still puzzled by the amount of stuff she was taking for what was supposedly a brief stay. As we approached Ryan's sleek black car parked about 50 yards down the street, I noticed him texting on his phone. He barely looked up when we arrived, offering only a cursory wave through the window. You sure everything's okay, sweetheart? I asked as she began loading her bags into his trunk. Everything's fine, she insisted, her tone clipped. I'll text you when I get there. She gave me a quick, obligatory hug, the kind that barely qualified as physical contact, before sliding into the passenger seat. Ryan finally acknowledged my presence with a nod and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Nice to see you again, Ms. Mitchell, he said smoothly. Take care of my girl, I replied, trying to sound lighthearted despite the unease growing in my stomach. As they drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Still, I reminded myself that Eliza was an adult now. She was entitled to spend time with her boyfriend without her mother hovering. Little did I know that this seemingly ordinary departure was the beginning of a betrayal I could never have anticipated. 2 days passed without any word from Eliza beyond a brief text saying she had arrived safely at Ryan's. I tried not to hover, but by the third day my concern was growing. Her responses to my messages became increasingly terse and infrequent. Just checking in. Everything okay? I texted on the third morning. Fine, came the one-word reply hours later. On day 4 I called her, but the call went straight to voicemail. When I finally received a text that evening, it only said, "Need more time. We'll call when ready." Ready for what? I wondered but decided to give her space. Perhaps they were having relationship problems and needed time to work things out. Or maybe they were just enjoying their time alone together. A thought that made me slightly uncomfortable, but I tried to be realistic about my daughter's adult life. A week passed, and my worry was turning into genuine alarm. I had called her multiple times with no response. I even drove by Ryan's parents' house one afternoon, only to find it dark and empty, with no sign of either Ryan's or Eliza's cars. That night I tried Thomas, hoping he might have heard from her. She hasn't called me in weeks, he said, sounding surprisingly unconcerned. But she's with her boyfriend, right? She's an adult, Becca. You need to give her some space. It's not like her to just disappear like this, I insisted. It's exactly like her age, Thomas countered. Remember what we were like at that age? She'll turn up when she needs money or laundry done. His cavalier attitude grated on me, but I decided not to push it. Thomas had always been the more laid-back parent, sometimes to the point of negligence. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet kitchen, staring at my phone, willing it to ring with a call from my daughter. It wasn't until the next morning that my concern transformed into something far more sinister. I was going through my mail when I noticed a letter from the bank where we held Eliza's college fund, and the special savings account Thomas had set up for her future. Thinking it was just a quarterly statement, I opened it without much thought. What I found instead was a notification of a large withdrawal, $44,780 to be exact, leaving a balance of just $220 in the account. My hands began to shake as I read the details. The withdrawal had been made in person at a branch 10 days ago, the day before Eliza told me she was going to stay at Ryan's. My signature had been required for the transaction since the account was still formally in my name. Except I hadn't made that withdrawal. I hadn't signed anything. With growing horror, I pulled out my checkbook from the drawer where I kept all my important financial documents. The most recent check was missing, the one that would have been number 347. Flipping through my check register, I saw no record of writing it. My stomach twisted into knots as the realization dawned on me. Eliza must have taken the check, forged my signature, and emptied the account her father had set up for her future. The room seemed to spin around me. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, trying to steady myself as waves of disbelief and betrayal washed over me. This couldn't be happening. Not Eliza. Not my little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who cried when her father missed her school play, who I had sacrificed everything for. With trembling fingers, I called the bank. After verifying my identity, the customer service representative confirmed my worst fears. Yes, Ms. Mitchell, the withdrawal was made on April 3rd at our downtown branch. We have the check on file with your signature authorizing the withdrawal to be converted to a cashier's check. But I didn't sign that check, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a pause on the line. I see. In that case, you'll need to come to the branch to fill out a fraud claim form. Do you have any idea who might have forged your signature? The question hung in the air. Did I really want to accuse my own daughter of theft and forgery? Part of me still hoped there was another explanation, that this was all some terrible misunderstanding. Oh, I need to look into this further, I finally said, ending the call before the tears that had been threatening could spill over. I sat at my kitchen table for what felt like hours, the bank statement clutched in my hand, trying to make sense of what had happened. Had Eliza really stolen the money meant for her future? Why would she need to take it now, and in such a deceptive way? And why hadn't she simply asked me or her father if she needed money for something? The more questions that swirled in my mind, the more my shock began to give way to anger. I had raised her better than this. I had sacrificed countless opportunities, personal comfort, and even relationships to give her a stable, loving home. How could she betray my trust like this? As evening approached, I made one more attempt to reach her. This time, miraculously, she answered. Mom. Her voice sounded distant, guarded. Eliza, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. I need you to come home. Now. We need to talk. I can't right now, she replied. Ryan and I are. I know about the money, Eliza. I cut in, unable to contain myself any longer. I know you forged my signature and emptied the account your father set up for you. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, but she offered no denial, no explanation. Eliza, I prompted. I needed it, she finally said, her voice cold and defensive. It's my money anyway. Dad always said it was for me. Her casual dismissal of her actions felt like a physical blow. It was for your future after you finished college. You stole it, Eliza. You committed forgery. Do you understand how serious this is? You and Dad have controlled everything about my life. She shot back, her voice rising. When I could access my own money, what I could study, who I could see. I'm an adult now. I deserve to make my own decisions. This isn't about being an adult, I said, struggling to keep my composure. Adults don't steal. They don't forge signatures. They don't disappear without explanation. I didn't steal anything that wasn't already mine, she insisted. And I didn't disappear. I told you I was staying with Ryan. The realization hit me then. This hadn't been a spontaneous decision. She had planned this carefully and deliberately. The luggage, the vague explanations, the distance she had been creating between us for weeks beforehand. It had all been leading to this moment. Where are you, Eliza? Whatever's going on, we can figure it out together. I pleaded, desperation creeping into my voice. I'm not coming home right now, she said firmly. Ryan and I have plans. I'll call you when I'm ready to talk. Plans? What plans could possibly justify stealing $45,000? I demanded. Her response chilled me to the bone. That's not your concern anymore. I need to go now. Eliza, wait. I began, but the line had already gone dead. I stared at my phone in disbelief, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. How had things gone so wrong? How had my bright, loving daughter transformed into someone capable of such calculated deception? That night I barely slept. I alternated between crying and seething with anger, between worrying about Eliza's well-being, and feeling the sharp sting of her betrayal. By morning I had made up my mind. I needed answers, and I needed to make sure my daughter wasn't in over her head. My first call was to Thomas, who reacted with a mixture of shock and fury when I told him what had happened. She did what? He exploded over the phone. I set that money aside for her education and future, not for her to run off with some boyfriend. I know, Thomas, I said wearily, but yelling about it doesn't help us find her or the money. He took a deep breath, clearly trying to calm himself. What do you know about this boyfriend? Could he have put her up to this? The question had been nagging at me as well. Ryan had always seemed ambitious, even calculating. I remembered the way he had barely acknowledged me when picking up Eliza, his apparent disinterest in making a good impression on her mother. I don't know him well, I admitted. But something about their relationship has felt off to me for a while now. Have you tried contacting his parents? Thomas asked. They're supposedly out of town, I replied. But I'll try to find their contact information. After hanging up with Thomas, I spent the morning scouring social media for any clues about Ryan's family. I found his mother's profile and sent her a message explaining that I was trying to reach Eliza and was concerned for her well-being. To my surprise, she responded within an hour. We've been home all month, she wrote. Ryan told us he was staying at a friend's place to study for exams. We haven't seen Eliza at all. Is everything all right? My heart sank. More lies. Where were they then? And what were they planning to do with all that money? I spent the rest of the day making calls, to Eliza's friends from high school and college, to relatives who might have heard from her, even to local hotels on the off chance they had checked in somewhere nearby. No one had seen or heard from her in days. By evening, I was exhausted and no closer to finding answers. I sat in Eliza's room, surrounded by the remnants of her childhood. Photos of us together, stuffed animals she couldn't bear to part with, the honor roll certificates I had proudly displayed on her wall. How had we gone from those happy moments to this nightmare of deception and betrayal? As I was about to leave her room, my eye caught on something poking out from beneath her bed, the corner of what looked like a brochure. Kneeling down, I pulled it out and found myself staring at a glossy pamphlet for beachfront property in Belize. Flipping through it, I discovered handwritten notes in the margins, calculations of costs, a list of documents needed for international property purchase, and a circled price of $42,000 for a starter villa. My blood ran cold. Was this what they had taken the money for? To buy property in another country? The audacity of it, the sheer recklessness, left me breathless. Did they really think they could just run off to paradise with stolen money and face no consequences? Attached to the brochure was a business card for a real estate agent named Miguel Sanchez, with an office in Belize City. Without hesitation, I grabbed my phone and dialed the international number. After several rings, a cheerful voice answered. Tropical Dreams Real Estate, Miguel speaking. How may I help you today? My name is Rebecca Mitchell, I said, trying to sound calm. I believe my daughter and her boyfriend may have been in contact with you about purchasing property in Belize. Ah yes, the young couple. Ryan and Eliza, correct? Very enthusiastic buyers. They made a deposit just yesterday on one of our beachfront starter villas. Wonderful choice. My heart hammered in my chest. When are they planning to finalize the purchase? They're scheduled to come to our office tomorrow afternoon to sign the papers and make the final payment, Miguel replied. Are you perhaps joining them for this exciting investment? No, I said, my mind racing. No, I'm not. Thank you for the information. I hung up and immediately called Thomas back. They're in Belize, I told him without preamble. They're using the money to buy property there. They're finalizing the deal tomorrow. Thomas was silent for a moment before responding with determination. I'm booking the next flight to Belize City. This has gone far enough. I'm coming with you, I said without hesitation. Becca, you don't have to. She's my daughter too, I cut him off. And she forged my signature to take that money. I'm coming. After a pause, he agreed. I'll text you the flight details. Pack light, we need to move fast. As I hung up, a storm of emotions swirled within me. Fear for my daughter, anger at her betrayal, and a steely resolve to set things right. I had spent my entire adult life putting my children first, sacrificing my own dreams and comfort for their benefit. I had turned the other cheek when Thomas had left us, had worked myself to exhaustion to maintain stability for our family. I had tolerated Eliza's increasing coldness and distance, attributing it to normal young adult growing pains. But this was a bridge too far. This was a violation of trust that cut to the very core of our relationship. As I packed a small bag for the unexpected journey to Belize, I knew that whatever happened next would forever change the dynamic between my daughter and me. The unconditional support and understanding I had always offered her would now come with boundaries. Boundaries she had forced me to establish through her own deceit. For the first time in my life as a mother, I was prepared to hold my child truly accountable for her actions, no matter how painful the process might be for both of us. The flight to Belize City was a blur of anxiety and restless exhaustion. Thomas and I barely spoke during the journey, each lost in our own thoughts and regrets. Had we been too lenient with Eliza? Had we somehow failed to instill proper values in her? Or was this entirely the influence of Ryan, who seemed to have swept her into his grandiose plans? We landed early in the morning, the humid tropical air hitting us like a wall as we exited the airport. Thomas had arranged for a local driver to take us directly to the real estate office, which wouldn't open for another few hours. "What's the plan when we get there?" I asked Thomas as our taxi weaved through the colorful streets of Belize City. He ran a hand through his graying hair, looking older than I remembered. "We wait for them to show up, confront them about the money, and make it clear that there will be serious legal consequences if they don't return it immediately." "Do you think that will work?" I asked, doubt creeping into my voice. Eliza seems different, harder somehow, like she doesn't care about consequences anymore. Thomas's jaw tightened. "She'll care when she's facing potential fraud charges. This isn't a game." And it's time she understood that. We arrived at Tropical Dreams Real Estate just as they were opening their doors. The office was small but well appointed, with photos of idyllic beachfront properties lining the walls. Miguel Sanchez, the agent I had spoken to on the phone, greeted us with surprise when we introduced ourselves. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, what an unexpected pleasure. Are you here to join in on your daughter's investment opportunity?" "Actually, we're here to stop it," Thomas said firmly. "The money being used for this purchase was obtained fraudulently. My daughter did not have authorization to access those funds." Miguel's friendly smile faltered. I see. This is a serious allegation." Ryan and Eliza assured me that everything was in order. "It's not," I said, stepping forward. "And we need your help to make this right." After some persuasion and Thomas hinting at potential legal complications for the agency if they processed a sale with fraudulent funds, Miguel agreed to call us when Ryan and Eliza arrived for their appointment. "They're scheduled to come at 2 o'clock, he told us. "I suggest you wait elsewhere until then. There's a cafe across the street with a good view of our entrance." We took his advice, settling into the small cafe with strong coffee and barely touched pastries. My stomach was too knotted with anticipation to eat. As we waited, watching the real estate office through the window, Thomas and I had our first real conversation since the divorce. "I should have been around more," he admitted quietly, staring into his coffee cup. "Maybe if I had been more present in her life, she wouldn't have fallen for someone like Ryan." "We both made mistakes," I conceded. "I might have been too protective, too controlling in my own way. But Thomas, nothing justifies what she did." "Nothing." He nodded slowly. "No, it doesn't. And she needs to understand that there are consequences for her actions." Just before 2 o'clock, a taxi pulled up to the real estate office. My heart leaped into my throat as I watched Eliza step out, followed by Ryan. She was wearing a flowery sundress I didn't recognize, her hair lighter than I remembered. She must have highlighted it recently. Ryan had his arm around her waist, guiding her toward the office door with an air of proprietary pride that made my skin crawl. They looked like any young couple on vacation. Relaxed, happy, excited about their future. The casual way they carried themselves, as if they hadn't committed a serious crime, as if they hadn't betrayed the trust of people who loved them, made my blood boil. "That's them," I said unnecessarily, already standing up. Thomas put a restraining hand on my arm. "Wait. Let's give Miguel a chance to call us as promised. We don't want to create a scene prematurely." Reluctantly, I sat back down, my eyes never leaving the door they had disappeared through. Minutes ticked by agonizingly slowly. Finally my phone rang, Miguel keeping his word. "They're here," he said in a hushed voice. "I've told them there's an issue with the paperwork that needs to be resolved before we can proceed. They're waiting in my office now." "We'll be right there," I replied, nodding to Thomas. As we crossed the street, my heart hammered so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. What would I say to my daughter? How could I convey the depth of hurt and betrayal I felt? Would she even care? Miguel met us at the door, looking uncomfortable but determined to do the right thing. He led us to his office, opening the door without announcing us. Eliza's face when she saw us walk in is something I'll never forget. First shock, then embarrassment, then most disturbing of all, a flash of cold defiance. Ryan, for his part, immediately straightened in his chair. his hand moving protectively to Eliza's arm. Mom? Dad? Eliza's voice was small, momentarily revealing the girl I knew rather than the stranger she had become. What are you doing here? I think you know exactly why we're here, Thomas said, his voice controlled but tight with anger. The money you stole wasn't yours to spend, Eliza. Ryan stood up, attempting to take control of the situation. Mr. Mitchell, there's been a misunderstanding. Eliza was simply accessing funds that were meant for her future. This property is an investment in that future. Sit down, young man, Thomas snapped with such authority that Ryan automatically complied. You don't get to speak for my daughter, and you certainly don't get to explain away fraud and forgery. I moved closer to Eliza, searching her face for any sign of remorse or understanding. Why, Eliza? Why would you do this? If you needed money, you could have talked to us. For a moment, she looked conflicted, vulnerability flashing across her features. But then she glanced at Ryan, and her expression hardened again. You wouldn't have understood, she said flatly. You never supported my relationship with Ryan. You always thought I should follow the path you chose for me. This isn't about Ryan or your life choices, I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. This is about you stealing money and betraying the trust of the people who love you most in the world. It wasn't stealing, she insisted, echoing her words from our phone call. Dad always said that money was for my future. This property is my future, our future, she added, reaching for Ryan's hand. Thomas stepped forward then, his patience clearly at an end. Let me make something very clear, Eliza. That money was held in trust for you to access after completing your education. By forging your mother's signature to obtain it early, you committed a crime. One that could result in serious legal consequences. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. We didn't mean any harm. We just wanted to start our lives together, away from. He trailed off, seeming to realize that finishing his sentence, away from you, wouldn't help their situation. By committing fraud? Thomas pressed. By hiding in another country with stolen money? That's not starting a life together. That's running from responsibility. Miguel, who had been standing awkwardly by the door, cleared his throat. Perhaps I should give you all some privacy to discuss this family matter. As he left, closing the door behind him, silence fell over the room. Eliza stared at the floor, her defiance seemingly deflating under the weight of her parents' united disapproval. Ryan looked increasingly nervous, his earlier confidence evaporating. Here's what's going to happen, Thomas finally said, his tone leaving no room for argument. You're going to return every penny of that money. You're both going to return to the States with us today. And then we're going to have a very serious conversation about the consequences of your actions. We've already put down a non-refundable deposit, Ryan protested weakly. That's your problem, Thomas replied coldly. Consider it an expensive lesson in making better life choices. I watched Eliza carefully, recognizing the stubborn set of her jaw, so like her father's, as she struggled with the ultimatum. I decided to try a different approach. Eliza, I said softly, sitting down next to her. I understand wanting independence. I understand falling in love and wanting to build a life with someone. But this isn't the way to do it. You're starting your adult life with deception and theft. Is that really the foundation you want for your future? Her eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw a flicker of doubt in them. You don't understand what it's like to always be the good girl, the responsible one, she said, her voice catching. To always do what's expected of you and never what you really want. I understand more than you know, I replied, thinking of all the dreams I had set aside to raise her and her brother after Thomas left. But taking shortcuts, hurting people who love you, that's not freedom, Eliza. It's just another kind of trap. Ryan, sensing Eliza's resolve weakening, tried to intervene. Babe, remember what we talked about. This is our chance to break free, to live life on our own terms. Thomas fixed him with a steely glare. And what exactly are your terms, Ryan? Living off stolen money in a foreign country? What happens when that runs out? Another forged check? Another theft? Ryan had no answer for that. He looked away, the fantasy he had been selling to my daughter visibly crumbling around him. Eliza's shoulders slumped, the full weight of what she had done finally seeming to hit her. I just wanted something that was mine, she whispered. Something I chose for myself. And you can have that, I assured her, taking her hand. But it has to be earned honestly, not taken deceptively. After what seemed like an eternity, Eliza nodded slowly. What do I need to do to fix this? Relief washed over me, though I knew we were far from resolving the deeper breach of trust. First, we cancel this property deal and recover as much of the money as possible. Then we all go home and figure out the next steps together. Ryan looked panicked. Eliza, you can't be serious. We've planned this for months. Think about what we're giving up. It was then that I saw something change in my daughter's eyes. A flicker of recognition, perhaps, that the man she thought she loved was more concerned about the lost opportunity than about her well-being or the moral implications of their actions. I am serious, Ryan, she said quietly. What we did was wrong. I need to make it right. His response confirmed my worst suspicions about him. If you do this, we're done, he threatened, his voice cold. I'm not going back to that dead-end life. Eliza flinched as if he had slapped her, but she didn't waver. Then we're done, she said, her voice gaining strength. Because I'm not continuing down this path. The look of shock on Ryan's face would have been satisfying if the situation weren't so heartbreaking. He clearly hadn't expected her to choose her family, and her integrity, over him and his promises of an exotic new life. Fine, he spat, standing up abruptly. Keep the deposit. Consider it payment for wasting my time. With that, he stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind him. Eliza burst into tears, the enormity of everything that had happened finally overwhelming her. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her close as she sobbed against my shoulder. Thomas awkwardly patted her back, his anger tempered by concern for his heartbroken daughter. It's going to be okay, I murmured, stroking her hair. We'll figure this out together. And in that moment, despite the hurt and betrayal that still needed to be addressed, I felt a glimmer of hope. My daughter had made a terrible mistake, but she had also found the courage to recognize it and take the first step toward making amends. It wasn't going to be easy, and our relationship would need a lot of healing, but at least we had a chance now. As we left the real estate office, having recovered most of the money minus the deposit Ryan had insisted on forfeiting, I realized that this crisis had brought Thomas and me together in a way I never would have expected. For the first time in years, we were acting as a united front, putting our differences aside for the sake of our child. The journey home would be long and uncomfortable, filled with difficult conversations and painful reckonings. But at least we were all going home together with a chance to rebuild what had been broken. Little did I know that the most difficult part of this ordeal was still to come. The flight back to the United States was tense and mostly silent. Eliza sat between Thomas and me, occasionally wiping away tears but otherwise withdrawn into herself. I could only imagine the turmoil she must have been feeling. The humiliation of being caught, the heartbreak of Ryan's easy abandonment, the daunting prospect of facing the consequences of her actions once we returned home. Thomas had booked us into a hotel for the night, as our hastily arranged return flights wouldn't leave until the following morning. As we checked in, Eliza finally spoke. I need some time alone, she said, her voice hoarse from crying. Can I have my own room? Thomas and I exchanged glances. After what had just happened, giving her space seemed risky, but we also recognized that she needed time to process everything. We'll get you your own room, Thomas said cautiously, but we keep the key cards for now. If you need to leave for any reason, one of us goes with you. She nodded dully, accepting the restriction without argument, a sign of just how defeated she felt. Once Eliza was settled in her room, Thomas and I convened in the hotel restaurant to discuss next steps. It was surreal sitting across from my ex-husband in a foreign country, trying to navigate this crisis together after years of minimal communication. What are we going to do about her? I asked Thomas, stirring my untouched coffee. She committed fraud, Thomas. Actual fraud. He rubbed his temples, looking as exhausted as I felt. I know. But pressing charges against our own daughter. I'm not suggesting that, I quickly clarified. But there have to be consequences. She can't just steal $45,000, run off to another country, and then expect everything to go back to normal with a simple "I'm sorry." Thomas nodded slowly. I agree. She needs to understand the gravity of what she's done. He paused, considering. I think she should take a leave of absence from college and get a full-time job to pay back the money she spent. The deposit, the flights, all of it. That seems fair, I agreed. And therapy. She needs to talk to someone about why she thought this was acceptable, why she was so easily influenced by Ryan. What about her relationship with us? Thomas asked quietly. How do we rebuild trust after something like this? It was a question I had been asking myself since discovering the theft. How do you trust someone who has betrayed you so completely? Especially when that someone is your own child. The person you've loved unconditionally since before they took their first breath. One day at a time, I finally answered. We set clear boundaries, clear expectations. We offer support without enabling. And we remember that even though she's our daughter and we love her, she's also an adult who made a terrible choice and needs to earn back our trust. Thomas reached across the table and squeezed my hand. An unexpectedly tender gesture that brought tears to my eyes. You've always been stronger than me, Becca. A better parent, too. I shook my head, too emotionally drained to argue the point. Let's just focus on getting through this. We finished our meal and checked on Eliza, who was curled up in bed, staring blankly at the wall. She barely acknowledged our presence when we brought her some food, which she left untouched on the nightstand. The night passed restlessly for all of us. I kept waking up, haunted by the image of Eliza's face when Ryan had walked out, so hurt, so surprised, as if she couldn't believe he would abandon her when things got difficult. It reminded me of how I had felt when Thomas left. That same sense of shock and betrayal despite all the warning signs that had been there all along. Morning came too quickly, the tropical sun streaming through the thin hotel curtains. Our flight wasn't until the afternoon, so Thomas suggested we take a walk along the beach, neutral territory where we might be able to have a more productive conversation with Eliza. She agreed reluctantly, following us down to the shoreline with her arms wrapped tightly around herself, a barrier against whatever we might say. We walked in silence for a while, the gentle lapping of waves against the shore the only sound between us. Finally, Thomas broke the silence. Eliza, we need to talk about what happens when we get home. She nodded but didn't look up from watching her feet make impressions in the wet sand. I'm going to jail, aren't I? The vulnerability in her voice made my heart ache despite everything. No, sweetie, I said gently. We're not pressing charges. But there will be consequences. Thomas explained our thoughts about her taking time off from school to work and pay back the money, about starting therapy to address the underlying issues that had led to her decisions. To my surprise, she didn't protest or argue. That's fair, she said quietly. More than fair, considering what I did. Her acceptance was almost more concerning than resistance would have been. It was as if the fiery, determined young woman I had raised had been replaced by this hollow shell, defeated and compliant. Eliza, I said, stopping and turning to face her directly. I need to know why. What made you think this was okay? Was it entirely Ryan's idea, or? She finally met my eyes and the pain I saw there was raw and real. It wasn't just Ryan, she admitted. I mean, yes, he found the property and convinced me we could start a new life there, but… She trailed off, struggling to find the words. But what? Thomas prompted gently. But I wanted to escape, she whispered. From expectations, from always being the good girl, from feeling like I was living someone else's version of my life. Whose version? I asked, genuinely confused. We've always supported your choices. She laughed bitterly. Have you? You supported the choices that fit your vision of who I should be. Perfect grades, prestigious university, sensible major. Anytime I showed interest in something different, art school, taking a gap year, even dating someone you didn't approve of, you both made it clear that wasn't the path you wanted for me. Her words stung, partly because there was truth in them. I had always pushed her towards stability and security, perhaps too rigidly at times. Thomas had been more laid back generally, but inflexible about certain expectations, particularly regarding her education. We wanted what was best for you, Thomas said defensively. You wanted what you thought was best, Eliza corrected. You never really asked what I wanted. I felt a surge of frustration. And that justifies theft and forgery? Eliza, if you were unhappy with your life, there were 1,000 better ways to change it. I know that now, she said, tears welling in her eyes. I'm not trying to justify what I did. It was wrong and I'll spend however long it takes making it right. I'm just trying to explain how I got to such a desperate place that running away with Ryan seemed like my only option for happiness. We continued walking, digesting her words. Had we really been so controlling that she felt her only escape was crime? The thought was devastating. I'm sorry if we made you feel trapped, I finally said. That was never our intention. We love you, Eliza. We've only ever wanted you to be happy and successful. I know, she said softly. I love you too. Both of you. I just lost myself somewhere along the way. And Ryan seemed to see a version of me that was exciting and free, not just responsible and dutiful. And look where that got you, Thomas muttered, unable to help himself. I shot him a warning glance. What your father means is that true freedom doesn't come from running away or taking shortcuts. It comes from making conscious choices and accepting responsibility for them. Eliza nodded, wiping away a tear. I understand that now. I just wish I hadn't hurt you both so much in the process of figuring it out. We walked back to the hotel in a more comfortable silence, the first fragile steps toward healing having been taken. The path ahead would be difficult. Regaining trust is always harder than losing it, but at least we were all walking it together. The first few weeks after our return were challenging. As agreed, Eliza withdrew from the spring semester of college and found a full-time job as an administrative assistant at a local insurance company. Ironically, the same kind of job I had taken to support her and Jason after the divorce. She moved back home with me, both as a practical measure to save money and as a way for us to rebuild our relationship. Thomas returned to his life across the country, but with a new commitment to being more present in Eliza's life, calling regularly and making plans to visit more often. The money we had recovered, about $42,000 after the lost deposit and travel expenses, was placed in a new account that required dual signatures for any withdrawal. It was a practical precaution but also a symbolic one. Trust would need to be rebuilt gradually. Eliza started seeing a therapist twice a week, working through the complex tangle of issues that had led to her poor decisions, her feelings of being controlled and stifled, her vulnerability to Ryan's influence, and the underlying insecurities that had made her so desperate for a dramatic escape from her life. For my part, I was trying to find the balance between supporting Eliza through this difficult time and maintaining the boundaries that were necessary for her growth. It wasn't easy. There were days when I would look at her, shoulders slumped with exhaustion after a long day of work, eyes red from crying over yet another realization in therapy, and all I wanted to do was make everything better for her, to shield her from the consequences of her actions. But I knew that wasn't what she needed. She needed to feel the full weight of her choices, to understand that actions have repercussions, and to find her own way through the mess she had created. Only then could she truly learn and grow from this experience. About a month after our return, we had a particularly difficult evening. Eliza had received a text from Ryan, the first contact since he had stormed out of the real estate office in Belize. He was back in the States and wanted to see her, claiming he had made a mistake and still loved her. I'm not going to meet him, she assured me, showing me the message. But part of me wants to. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the remains of dinner still in front of us. I took a deep breath, fighting the urge to launch into all the reasons Ryan was toxic for her. Why do you think that is? I asked instead, trying to use the techniques her therapist had suggested for our conversations. Eliza traced patterns on the tabletop with her finger, not meeting my eyes. Because when I was with him I felt special, chosen, like I was enough just being me, not because of my grades or achievements or being the good daughter. He made me feel like I was worth running away with. The sadness in her voice broke my heart. Had I really made my own daughter feel like she wasn't enough just being herself? Had my pride in her accomplishments somehow translated into conditional love in her mind? Eliza, I said gently, you've always been enough. From the moment you were born, before you had accomplished anything at all, you were already everything I could have wanted. If I ever made you feel like my love was tied to your achievements, I failed you as a mother. She looked up, tears shimmering in her eyes. It wasn't just you. It was dad, teachers, everyone. This constant pressure to be perfect, to never disappoint anyone. Ryan was the first person who seemed to want me for me, flaws and all. But he didn't want the real you either, I pointed out carefully. He wanted the you who would go along with stealing money and running away. He wanted the you who would abandon your family and education for his fantasies. That's not seeing your true worth. That's using you for his own ends. She winced but nodded slowly. My therapist said something similar. That he was attracted to my compliance, not my authentic self. She hesitated, then added. She also said that I was so eager to please him because it was familiar. That I'd been trying to please everyone my whole life, and he just became the new focus of that pattern. It was a painful insight, but one that rang true. Eliza had always been eager to make others happy, to meet and exceed expectations. It was a quality I had praised and encouraged, never considering how it might become a vulnerability. I think she might be right, I acknowledged. And that's something I need to work on too. Making sure you know that you're loved for who you are, not what you do. The conversation marked a turning point in our healing process. From that day forward, I made a conscious effort to separate my pride in Eliza's accomplishments from my love for her as a person. I started asking more about her thoughts and feelings rather than just her achievements, making space for her to express doubts and insecurities without rushing to fix them. Slowly, day by day, we began to rebuild trust. Eliza kept her word about not seeing Ryan, even when he persisted in trying to contact her. She worked diligently at her job, gradually paying back the money that had been spent. She engaged fully in therapy, confronting difficult truths about herself and our family dynamics. And I worked on myself too, examining the ways my own fears and insecurities had shaped my parenting, learning to listen more and direct less, trusting that the values I had tried to instill in my daughter were still there beneath the mistakes she had made. 6 months after the incident, we were in a much better place. Eliza had repaid nearly $3,000 of what she owed, had completed an intensive therapy program, and was making plans to return to college in the fall, though with a new major that better aligned with her personal interests rather than what she thought would please others. Thomas had visited twice during this period, each time making genuine efforts to connect with Eliza as the young adult she was becoming rather than the little girl he remembered. Their relationship was evolving into something new, and potentially stronger than before. As for me, I was learning to let go, not of my love or concern, but of my need to control outcomes and protect Eliza from every possible hurt or mistake. It was a slow process, fraught with anxiety, but necessary for both of us. On a warm Saturday in late summer, Eliza and I were working in the garden together, a shared activity that had become a peaceful space for conversation during her time at home. I got a letter from Coastal State University yesterday, she said casually, pulling weeds from around the tomato plants. They've accepted my application for the visual arts program starting this fall. I looked up in surprise. Coastal State was about 3 hours away, much farther than her previous university. And visual arts was a significant departure from the business degree she had been pursuing. That's wonderful, sweetheart, I said, genuinely meaning it despite the little flutter of anxiety in my chest at the thought of her moving farther away. Are you excited? She nodded, a real smile lighting up her face. It's what I've always wanted to study, Mom, even back in high school, but I was too afraid to say so. I thought you and Dad would think it wasn't practical enough. I'm sorry we ever made you feel that way, I said, setting down my trowel. Your happiness is what matters most to us. It always has been, even if we didn't always show it the right way. I know that now, she replied. And I'm sorry for what I did. Not just the money and the forgery, but for not trusting you enough to talk to you about what I really wanted. I reached over and squeezed her dirt-covered hand, my heart full. We're both learning, aren't we? She squeezed back. Yeah, we are. Later that evening after dinner, Eliza brought a large envelope to the living room where I was reading. I wanted to show you something, she said, sitting beside me on the couch. Some of the portfolio pieces I submitted to Coastal State. She pulled out a series of drawings and paintings, landscapes, portraits, abstract compositions, all showing remarkable talent and sensitivity. I looked through them slowly, amazed by this side of my daughter I had barely glimpsed before. Eliza, these are beautiful, I said, genuinely impressed. How long have you been creating art like this? Years, she admitted. I used to work on them late at night in my room, or during free periods at school. It was my secret escape, I guess. The thought of her hiding this passion, this talent broke my heart all over again. I wish you had felt comfortable sharing this with me sooner. Me too, she said softly. But I'm sharing it now. And I want to keep sharing things with you. The real me, not just the version I think you want to see. I pulled her into a hug, tears pricking at my eyes. That's all I've ever wanted, sweetheart. To know the real you. As she returned to her room with her artwork, I remained on the couch, reflecting on the painful journey we had taken to reach this point. The betrayal and hurt were still there, like a healing wound that occasionally aches when the weather changes. But alongside it was a new understanding, a deeper appreciation for my daughter as a complex, imperfect human being with her own dreams and desires. The money she had stolen was slowly being repaid. The trust she had broken was gradually being rebuilt. And perhaps most importantly, we were both learning valuable lessons about honesty, boundaries, and the complicated, messy reality of loving someone enough to let them make their own choices, even when those choices might lead to pain. Eliza's departure for Coastal State University came faster than I expected. The day before she was scheduled to leave, Thomas flew in to help with the move and to say goodbye. We had agreed to transfer half of the recovered funds to a new account in Eliza's name as a show of renewed trust, with the understanding that it was for her education and future establishment, exactly as originally intended. The three of us sat at my kitchen table that evening, sharing a meal together as a family, something that hadn't happened in years. The conversation flowed more easily than I would have thought possible 6 months earlier, touching on Eliza's new program, Thomas's recent promotion, my consideration of finally pursuing the nursing degree I had put on hold when the children were young. As we finished dessert, Eliza suddenly grew serious. There's something I need to say to both of you before I leave tomorrow. Thomas and I exchanged glances, instantly alert. What is it, sweetheart? I asked, trying to keep my voice light despite the sudden tension in the room. Eliza took a deep breath. I want to thank you, both of you, for not giving up on me when you had every right to, for loving me enough to hold me accountable, but also to forgive me. Her voice wavered slightly. I know what I did was terrible. I betrayed your trust in the worst way. And I'm still ashamed of it every day. Eliza, Thomas began, but she held up a hand. Please let me finish. I need to say this. She steadied herself before continuing. What happened in Belize? Seeing your faces when you walked into that office, watching Ryan walk away the moment things got difficult, it was the wake-up call I needed. As horrible as it was, it forced me to see who I was becoming and to make different choices. I reached across the table and took her hand. We never doubted that the real you, the kind, thoughtful person we raised, was still in there. You just lost your way for a while. And we're not perfect either, Thomas added, surprising me with his humility. We've both made serious mistakes in our lives. The important thing is that you're finding your path now, your authentic path. Not the one Ryan was pushing or even the one we might have wanted for you. Eliza smiled through tears. I'm trying. And I promise I won't waste this second chance. As we cleared the dishes together, moving around the kitchen in comfortable synchronicity, I marveled at how our worst crisis had ultimately brought us to a healthier place. Not because the betrayal wasn't real or serious, but because it had forced us all to confront difficult truths about ourselves and our relationships. Thomas would return to his life across the country tomorrow afternoon, but with a renewed commitment to being present in Eliza's life. Eliza would move to Coastal State, embarking on a new chapter that truly reflected her passions and priorities. And I would remain in our suburban home, continuing my own journey of growth and self-discovery. We would never forget what had happened, the theft, the deception, the painful confrontation in Belize. It would always be part of our family story, but it wouldn't define us or our relationships moving forward. Like a bone that breaks and heals stronger at the fracture point, we had emerged from this ordeal more resilient, more honest with ourselves and each other, and perhaps even more deeply connected than before. Eliza has been at Coastal State for 3 months now. She calls regularly, not out of obligation, but because she genuinely wants to share her experiences with me. Her voice is lighter than I've heard it in years, full of enthusiasm for her classes and the creative community she's found there. Thomas and I communicate more frequently as well, co-parenting in a way we never managed when the children were younger. He's planning to visit Eliza for her art show next month, and has invited me to join them, an offer I'm seriously considering. As for me, I finally enrolled in those nursing prerequisites I'd put off for so long. At 47, I'm easily the oldest student in most of my classes, but there's something liberating about pursuing my own dream after decades of putting everyone else first. The money Eliza took has been fully restored to the account, partly through her continued payments and partly through Thomas's decision to add to the fund himself, a gesture of his commitment to her future. She won't be able to access it independently until after graduation as originally planned, but now that restriction feels less like control and more like the supportive guidance it was always meant to be. Ryan has long since stopped trying to contact Eliza. We later learned through mutual acquaintances that he had attempted the same scheme with another girlfriend at a different college, convincing her to access family funds for an investment opportunity in paradise. Fortunately, that young woman's parents discovered the plan before any money changed hands. Sometimes at night I still think about those terrible days, discovering the theft, the confrontation in Belize, the long journey back to trust. I remember the shock and betrayal I felt, the fear that my daughter had become someone I didn't recognize. But those memories no longer carry the same sting. Instead, they serve as a reminder of how easily relationships can fracture when communication breaks down, when love becomes entangled with control, when we stop seeing each other clearly. Last week, a small package arrived from Coastal State. Inside was a framed charcoal drawing, a portrait of me that Eliza had done for one of her classes. It captured not just my physical features, but something deeper, the strength and resilience I hadn't always recognized in myself. With it was a simple note. To the woman who showed me what real courage looks like. Thank you for not giving up on me. Love, Eliza. I hung it in my living room where I can see it every day. A tangible reminder that even our most painful experiences can ultimately lead to growth, understanding, and a deeper appreciation for the complex, imperfect people we love. My daughter took my trust and nearly $45,000 that wasn't hers to take. She lied to my face and ran off to another country. She broke my heart in ways I never thought possible. And then, when confronted with the consequences of her actions, she found the courage to make amends, to do the difficult work of rebuilding what she had destroyed, to become not the person others wanted her to be, but the person she truly wanted to be herself. I couldn't be prouder of the woman she's becoming. And in watching her transformation, I've discovered new strength in myself as well. The strength to set boundaries without building walls, to offer forgiveness without forgetting the lessons learned, and to love completely without losing myself in the process. Money can be replaced. Trust can be rebuilt. And sometimes the worst betrayals can lead to the most profound healing. If we're brave enough to face the painful truths they reveal, and do the hard work of growing beyond them. My name is Rebecca Mitchell. I'm 47 years old, a mother, a student, a survivor of betrayal, and ultimately, a witness to the extraordinary power of accountability, forgiveness, and second chances. This is my story. Not just of what my daughter took from me, but of what we ultimately found together on the other side of heartbreak. That night, as I sat alone in my quiet house looking at Eliza's drawing, my phone pinged with a text message. It was from her, sending a photo of her latest art project. A mixed media piece exploring themes of forgiveness and redemption. It was beautiful and raw, full of both pain and hope. Got an A, her message read. Professor said it was emotionally honest. Thought you'd want to see. I smiled as I typed my reply. It's stunning, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you, not for the grade, but for the courage it takes to make art that honest. Her response came quickly. I learned that from you, Mom. Love you. Love you too, I wrote back, realizing with sudden clarity that through all the hurt and healing of the past year, those 3 words had remained the most important truth between us. Unchanged, undiminished, and ultimately unbreakable. The money that had almost destroyed our relationship was back where it belonged, waiting to help launch Eliza into her future. But the real treasure we had recovered was far more valuable. The authentic connection between a mother and daughter who had seen the worst in each other and loved each other anyway, who had walked through fire together and emerged not unscathed, but undefeated. And that, I knew with absolute certainty, was worth more than any amount of money could ever be.